We are now recording. We're live. What's up, everybody? My name is Clay Barber, and we are coming to you for the Swim Guide 2022 recap. This is part of our Tell Me About It Tuesday series. Really happy to be here with y'all tonight. Thank you for giving your time and concentration to our program. Swim Guide is very special to us and our organization. Again, if you got any questions while we're talking, throw them in the chat and we will get to those at the end of our little slideshow here. And yeah, without further ado, we will get started. I believe you can already see my screen. Our Sound River Swim Guide 2022 recap opener. And yeah, a little bit about me. I am Clay Barber. I'm the program director for Sound Rivers. I'm originally from Martin County, North Carolina, which is a lot of farms, a lot of swamps. We've got some land that backs up to the Roanoke River and the Devil's Gut area. So if you're familiar with those places, you know it's a beautiful place. I've just grown up really lucky to have this interaction with waterways and swamplands and wetlands, and happy to be doing what I'm doing now because of it. And I'm actually living there now. By the way, I was living in the watershed and then moved home for a little bit, so it's actually closer to my Washington office. And then in college, just a little background, I did recreation and park management and a master's degree at sustainable tourism at East Carolina University. Go Pirates. Again, another part of my life that I feel like is really in line with what I'm doing here at Sound Rivers. So really fortunate for that, thankful for that. And I discovered Sound Rivers via the Tarr-Pamlico Riverkeeper. I was working for a kayak rental company called Knee Deep Adventures, doing river tours on the Tarr-Pamlico, and renting kayaks and teaching people how to do stand-up paddleboarding and all that stuff. And I would always volunteer for these river cleanups, or I would see Sound Rivers people out and about doing kids river fest at River Park North, and saw them on social media, and I used to just think like, what a cool job, like what a important job. And so this is my third year with Sound Rivers and just loving it, learning something new every day, going to new places all the time. We operate in a pretty big area, so you never know where the day's work is going to lead you. Enough about me though. Sound Rivers, I love this slide. It's just a really good overview, like I said, of the huge area that we cover. A lot of people hear Noose and the Tarr-Pamlico River and they just think of the river, but it's not just the river, is it? It is all 12,000 plus miles of land that feed those rivers. Every little ditch and creek and tributary that ultimately goes to these awesome rivers, and picking up whatever is in the way and bringing it on the way. So and yeah, over 2 million residents in this area, so you got a lot of human environment interaction going on, a lot of development, a lot of human needs that have different impacts on water quality. So that's kind of why we are here. And my coworker Katie put this together. I love this. This is just a good acronym for kind of all the things that we do here at Sound Rivers in a nutshell. A prime nonprofit. We are always advocating, protecting, restoring, investigating, monitoring, and educating people about everything water quality related. Everywhere we go, people see out on the boat and they ask, "What's Sound Rivers? What are these impacts? What should I be on the lookout for?" And it's just a really great mission, great organization. Can't say enough good things about it. And we're here for some pretty specific things. bacteria, nutrient, and litter pollution. Like I said, we were talking about that big area that drains down to these two rivers. Stormwater runoff, agricultural runoff, sewer spills, micro and macro plastics, they all find their way to these waterways through the little ditches and tributaries and creeks. And they both waterways ultimately lead to our state's beloved sounds and estuaries. They're very unique, very special places, super important for the environment, for the economy, and for cultural history. Just very important waterways, very important destinations, and they are always impacted by development, flooding, hurricanes, and stuff like that. And we're seeing a lot of sea level rise and crazy storm events due to climate change. So this is a little bit of what we're up against while we're doing what we're doing. Just to kind of break down what you're seeing, we have some volunteers cleaning out a trash trap in a creek as part of our plastic studies. We've got some pretty nasty water in a creek up in Durham. And right next to it, you see a construction site. That's what leads to that soupy looking sediment filled water you see. And then in the bottom left over there, we have a animal agriculture, CAFO, a concentrated animal feeding operation. And if they are too close to the river and they flood, that's no good. So that's a little bit of what Sound Rivers does as a whole, but we are here to talk about Swim Guide. So what is Swim Guide? It's an annual weekly screening for fecal bacteria indicators at popular recreational spots. We do this from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and we are producing this data for the public to know about. And we put it on a variety of outlets, websites, apps, radio stations, TV stations. We have another slide for that. But Sound Rivers, this year we sampled 52 sites. It's more sites than we've sampled ever before. And those are split fairly evenly between the Neuse and Tar-Pamlico basins. And again, those aren't just, the river themselves. They're tributaries and creeks that feed into these rivers. Swim Guide is actually, we don't hold trademark to that name. We are an affiliate partner that uploads our data to theswimguide.org. And theswimguide.org is it is a product of another organization that I believe is in Canada, and they are called Swim Drink Fish. And awesome mission, awesome organization. Couldn't be happier to be a part of this program. And they are kind of a worldwide organization in the sense that they have water quality data coming in for about 8,000 destinations. They call them beaches. Yeah, so even if it's a boat ramp on a river, they're going to call it a beach. So just gotta make that known. We throw around the Swim Guide all the time, but we are actually a affiliate partner, and happy to be so. We definitely get our information out to places other than that website, but I encourage you all to go check it out. And yeah, we try and hit the popular recreation spots. We do it from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and we want to make everything that we find as public as possible. So when I say we're doing the Swim Guide, what does that mean? Like, what is that process? This is the short version. It's a nice little 10-step thing of what our day-to-day kind of looks like between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It can get pretty hectic. It's a big program. It's a lot of space covered. It's a lot of people that we're interacting with, a lot of supplies that we got to keep, you got to make sure our inventory is up where we need it to be. So I'll just run through it so you get an idea of what it takes. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pick our sites, and that's a whole process. We try and go for popular publicly accessible locations. So we're talking Wildlife Resource Commission boat ramps, parks, city parks, greenway trails. And then if we have a gap that we want to fill, or if we have someone reach out to us with like a private location that makes sense, we'll go sample there. We just got to make sure they're cool with volunteers and folks coming out to their property. So that's kind of how we choose our locations. And municipalities and folks are welcome to sponsor their own location. I know we work with the city of Greenville and a couple other municipalities to sample specific spots so they can warn their folks about potential hazards and also brag about their wonderful water quality. So it's a kind of a win-win, and we get the information. So that's how we pick our sites. And then we hire some college interns. We have been really fortunate to have just an awesome group of interns for all 3 years that I've been here. We usually get interns from UNC, the UNC Charlotte, UNC Chapel Hill, or East Carolina University. And like I said, I mean, we would not be able to do this program without those interns. They are crucial, and it's really cool to educate them and watch them learn and grow and do everything to keep Swim Guide going. So once we got our interns hired and onboarded and trained in their how to take water samples and everything, we turn it over to them a little bit, and they have a little pod of volunteers. When I say a pod, I mean we usually divide our volunteers between the Tar Pamlico watershed and then the Upper Neuse and the Lower Neuse. For a long time, we had an Upper Neuse Riverkeeper and a Lower Neuse Riverkeeper and one Tar Pamlico Riverkeeper. And nowadays we have one Tar Pamlico Riverkeeper, Jill Howell, and one Neuse Riverkeeper, Samantha Crop. And we have a staff scientist down in New Bern, our executive director and myself and our office manager and our communications director all work out of Washington. So we have pods of volunteers that kind of center around each office. And our interns are charged with training them, and they work out a schedule to make sure all of our sites are covered when they need to be covered. People take vacations, people get sick. It's a continuous logistics problem solving thing that happens the entire summer. For 15 weeks, it's usually 14 to 15 weeks depending on the calendar year, but it's always Memorial Day to Labor Day. And we just do that because that's just a peak recreation time. There's the most people out on the water. It's nice and hot outside. Everybody wants to go swimming. So we just feel like that's the best time to reach these people with that information. And so for those 15 weeks, Thursday mornings, all our volunteers deploy out into their respective locations. They collect a water sample for us and they transport it back to our interns or Sound River staff. And that sounds simple. It is not. There's a lot of room between Lake Royale and our Washington office, or Raleigh and New Bern. So again, a lot of logistics, just getting samples from point A to point B on time. There's a 4-hour window that we have between sample collection and sample processing. So a lot to get done in a very short amount of time. And once we have all of our samples at our offices, our interns process those samples. They have specific chemical reagents that they add to some IDEX trays. IDEX is the company that we work with all our sampling equipment. And those samples go into an incubator for 24 hours. So we try and get them in as fast as possible on Thursdays so that we can then check them as early as possible on Fridays. So they've been baking overnight for 24 hours, and then Friday afternoon rolls around, our interns or a Sound River staff member will pull out the samples and they will analyze them. They're really cool. That's kind of the coolest part of the process, in my opinion, because you get this black light and you wave it over the samples, and Some of the trays will glow, and there's a calculation involved, and they determine what sites have passed and what sites have failed. And we'll touch on that later. But once they know what has passed and failed, we get all those results to our communications director, and she does a fantastic job of getting those results to radio stations and our social media pages and our website and um, everywhere that they need to go as soon as possible, so that folks can make an informed decision about where they're going to go over the weekend. We really try and get everything done before 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, because that's just when everybody's making plans. And then last but not least, once we're in the swing of it, we can really start to hone in on problem areas. So if it's like, this site has failed terribly for 4 weeks in a row now, like what is going on here? We'll take some time the next week to send a river keeper out there, send our scientist out there to kind of poke around and see what may be causing those failures, and try to resolve that issue. That's a nutshell of the process when I say we're doing swim guide. And it's a lot. It really takes all of our staff, our interns and our volunteers. They really go above and beyond to make this all happen. So when we get those results, we are always trying to push them out further and further every year. We pick up more sites, we get more volunteers, we want to get results in more places. And right now, they're going on that swimguide.org website, which has a huge reach. They're going on our Sound Rivers webpage, where we try and replicate everything in English and in Spanish, because we have a large population of Spanish speaking folks within our watersheds. We try and do some videos, whether they are Facebook videos or Instagram reels or something, to get our interns and our staff in front of the public, physically speaking about what is happening on our waterways. We have a text alert system. It's got a character limit, so you're not going to get like a whole Facebook post in your text, but it will highlight what has failed that week, and it will provide a link to our map so that you can then view the remainder of the results. And we do that, we offer that in English and Spanish as well. And then any TV station and radio station that will have us, we love for them to get our results out there. I have Public Radio East up here because they've been a particularly long time supporter. They've got a big reach. We know a lot of people listen to PRE, myself included, and they've just been great about getting our results out. So yeah, that we want people to make their own informed decisions. We're not shutting down places to swim, but if you're going to hit the water, if you're going to have a lot of contact with the water, there's a difference between doing a little bit of fishing where just maybe your fingertips are going to come into contact with a fish, versus going water skiing where you may take a full dive into the river. And so if somewhere has failed for that week, you might not want to practice water skiing there, but it may not be the end of the world for you to go fishing there. So that's where our results go. I've mentioned site failures quite a bit right now. So one of the biggest questions that we get is what does that mean? Or we get a lot of reactions. I've seen everything from it doesn't matter that something failed, and I've seen people be like, whoa, this failed. Like, don't even look at the water. You're gonna get sick if you even look at the water. But I just wanted to make a slide to kind of specify what it means when we fail a site. And that's just that we're finding higher than normal presence of bacteria found in the waste of red-blooded animals. So E. coli and enterococci are the two bacterias that we sample for. If there is too much fecal bacteria in the water, your skin is not going to melt off of your bones when you touch the water. Um, but it is good to know that that bacteria is in there, because let's say you have a big open wound on your hand. That would not be great to go dipping in the waters of a site that failed. That's asking for a bacterial infection. And again, the water skiing analogy, if we've just failed a site for bacteria, that might not be the best place to go water skiing, where you might get water shot up your nose or in your ears, or you might take a big gulp of it. Um, a lot of pets, we have a lot of folks that like to get on the water with their dogs, or just let their dogs run around at the river, and they're, gulping water down and stuff. I have seen dogs get sick from nasty water. That's no fun either. So that's what we mean when something has failed. And we fail things based on federal water quality standards that the Environmental Protection Agency set back in 1986. And just so you know, we have a chart in our office that ranges from 0 to 2,500 MPN. That stands for most probable number. So anything greater than 235 for E. coli or 104 for enterococci, if it's over that, we're going to fail that site. And that means that there is probably a lot more than that in the waterway that we're testing. And that's been deemed by the EPA to be dangerous to humans. So there's different standards for different reasons. If we're in fresh water, there is no salt in this water. We're talking high up in the waterway. We're talking Raleigh, Rocky Mount, those areas. We test for E. coli. E. coli is a very reliable measure of how much fecal bacteria is in the water. But when you have the presence of salt, so when you have a waterway with a salinity level, salt water and E. coli don't mix too well. E. coli does not survive very well in salty water. So we consulted with the Division of Marine Fisheries and a couple other, industry professionals, and if there's any sorts of salinity present in the water, we test for enterococci. It's very similar to E. coli. It's just known to survive better in salt water. And we also dilute our saltwater samples, because the salt in the water can cause a false positive on our readings. So, and there's also a different temperature at which high salinity water needs to incubate. So the salinity level of where we're sampling matters a great deal, because it alters our sampling procedure and our processing procedure quite a bit. And we have to order different chemical reagents and all this stuff. So we actually had to do a lot more of that this year because of the drought that we're in, but we have another slide based on that. So to wrap up, that is what we mean when we fail a site. You're running the risk of infection, you're running the risk of some stomach problems, and if it's dirty enough to harbor E. coli or enterococci, then it's probably harboring some other bacteria as well. That just means there's a lot of runoff, a lot of nasty stuff making their way to the water. Some findings that we saw over this year. So we've been doing things pretty much the same for 5 years now. And like I said, it gets bigger and bigger every year. I think we started with just in 2018, I think we were just doing the lower Neuse and the lower Tarpamlico. But now we have 52 sites, and it's all managed by 3 interns, a little over 30 volunteers, and we collect about over 800, I will say well over 800 samples. Sometimes we have to go back and recollect a sample, or or we have to collect 2 samples at one location because we're not entirely sure if we need to be sampling for Entero or if we need to be sampled for E. coli. So there is just a ton of sampling that has happened in this period. And just one fun fact, it's 176 road miles from our upmost sampling destination, which is at the very top of Falls Lake. It's Hickory Hill Boat Ramp, all the way down to Pierce Creek, which is kind of near Oriental. So it's 176 miles to drive from point A to point B. And I say that because depending on the logistical situation of the day, you know, if enough volunteers have an issue that they can't cover their sites, our interns and our staff, we then deploy to go collect those samples because we try our best to not leave anywhere unsampled. So it's a lot of driving some days on a timetable. So if you were to somehow paddle between those 2 locations, it's around 230 river miles, which is a long way. Our Tar Pamlico River Keeper and our Neuse River Keeper and the Rogue River Keeper from the other side of the country just wrapped up a 150-mile paddle from Smithfield to New Bern on the Neuse. It's called the Neuse River Rising. I encourage you all to go check it out. They have a little recap about every day of their paddle on our Facebook page, but that's 150 miles over 10 days. So 230 miles. I mean, that's a long paddle. But it's just another representation of the sheer vast area that we're covering with this program. Some other takeaways that are not so logistical. Lakes. We found that our lakes within these watersheds, especially those with really healthy riparian buffers, they have cleaner water. Even when the rain comes and even when it storms and we have hurricanes, those bodies of water are just a little more resilient to runoff and stuff. They literally just don't have as much runoff and pollution going into them as our main river channels. And when I say riparian buffers, I mean just undeveloped land, forests, wetlands, swamps that haven't been filled with concrete, and there's no sewer lines that can be broken. There's no farms too close. Whenever you give nature the space to filter out the water, it will do it phenomenally. So Falls Lake up in the Triangle area, Lake Royale at the very top of the Tar River watershed, Wildwood Park in Greenville. They all had really, really good results this summer. And so we like to say that if it's rained really heavy or if it's rained for multiple days, you got to give it a day or 2 or maybe even 3 days before you hit your favorite river spot. But these lakes, they tend to clean up a bit faster and sometimes not even get full of bacteria in the first place. So lakes are great for recreation, long story short. And just as a general rule, when you see dense urban development, I'm thinking Raleigh, I'm thinking Rocky Mount, I'm thinking Greenville, Washington, you're going to have more pet waste. Everybody, and just imagine a suburban neighborhood where everybody has 1 or 2 or 3 dogs and a cat. So they got dogs pooping in the yard, they got cat litter they got to get rid of, and if it's not going into a trash can or into an approved receptacle, then it's going on the ground, and every time it rains, it's going to the nearest ditch, which goes to the nearest creek, which winds up in the river. So urban development, more pet waste, and undersized or damaged sewage infrastructure and septic systems. So a couple examples that I have right there in parentheses is Pool Road Canoe Launch in Raleigh. I love Raleigh. I love the greenway that they have there. And I hate to pick on Pool Road, but we just found out that they are wrapping up a big sewer line replacement project. which tells me a few things. It tells me that if we had failures in that area this summer, it is very likely due to some runoff from that sewer line replacement construction project. Because I mean, it is right there. We actually had to sample away from Pool Road for a couple weeks because construction wouldn't allow access to our normal sample location. And then when we got back, we saw some high levels. But it also tells me that maybe in years prior to now, if we had failures at Pool Road, it might also be linked to that old undersized sewer infrastructure that they had to replace. So maybe it wasn't handling the load that it was supposed to be taking and it was overflowing. Maybe the pipes were old and cracked and there was sewage leaking out here and there. So um, staying on top of development projects and stuff like that is key to this program and our organization as a whole, so that we can kind of piece together the puzzle of why we're seeing really high levels of E. coli somewhere. Um, and another example of that is Slocum Creek in Havelock. Poor Slocum Creek is, spoiler alert, our dirtiest site of the season. And it wasn't very great last year, as I remember. And our staff scientist, Katie, she has so much experience with this. Unfortunately, the town of Havelock just has a really bad sewer problem. They experience a lot of sewer overflows. So anytime it rains a lot, or their sewer system is overloaded, and the water table kind of creeps up, and it's nasty. I mean, just imagine a sewer manhole gushing water out of the top for hours. Like they try and estimate the amount of gallons that are leaked from those types of situations, but it's really hard unless you were there when it started and there when it ended. And I can guarantee you that's rare. So they usually come in and they make an estimate, and we always kind of assume it's a little more than they let the public know about. So we were always hounding public municipalities. We were hounding DEQ about fixing these problems, creating better standards for letting the public know when this type of stuff happens. But we oftentimes can zero in on these things, or we can put the puzzle pieces together through our swim guide program. Because once a site fails terribly, like 6 weeks in a row, you know there's a problem there. And that's not natural. That's not, your average rainstorm and some geese down at the boat ramp. That's a serious infrastructure problem that needs to be addressed, and it's going to be expensive and it's going to be time consuming. And so we're just always a bug in the ear to try and get them to fix that. And last, we were in a drought this year. We just did not see the level of rain this summer that we saw in years past, and that's actually, good for waterways. It's not great for some folks, folks that have gardens, farmers and stuff. They need the rain, and we don't wish a drought on anybody. But if there's less rain, there is less runoff going into our waterways, which means the water is cleaner. It also means that salinity levels from the estuaries creeps up river farther than it usually does, because there's not water flowing down the river at the same rate. So that again led to our, we had to kind of adjust on the fly, if you will, because we were seeing some sites that were usually freshwater that we would sample for E. coli in one way, that were suddenly becoming very salty. And so we would have to alter our sampling process in those locations. And if you got 5 locations that were freshwater and are now salty water, that's quite a big impact on your logistics and your inventory and all the things behind the scenes. And then flip that equation, if we get a ton of rain, you're going to have a ton of runoff and you're going to have dirtier water. and you're going to have more freshwater sites than saltwater sites. So those are just some general lessons that we have learned over the years through this program. Some more, I guess, informational, more acute findings is literally, this is the breakdown of all of our sites, and what has passed at 100%, never failed a sample during our program, and it was a bulk of the waterways, which we're super excited about. That entire upper Neuse category is all Falls Lake, which just kind of backs up what I was saying earlier. Those lakes with healthy buffers against development just have really nice clean water. As far as fecal bacteria is concerned. And then in the lower Neuse, those sites that you see are also, a little more off the beaten path. They're not super close to the large developments and stuff. And then the Tar Pamlico, it really had a knockout year. There was a lot of places along the Tar that did really well. The next little thing you see is less than 75%. So we broke out the percentages right there next to you. That is the percentage at which they passed. So Buffalo Road only passed 53% of the time. It made our dirtiest site list, if you see all the way over there to the right. And you can kind of see a breakdown of that. I personally, let's see if I can share this map really quick. Can everybody see the map? Vale, is it showing my map, or is it still showing the slideshow? Yes, we're on the map. Okay, I live on this map. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time for it, but you got to know that I spend a heck of a lot of time on this map. And this is all of our sampling sites, and right now they are coded. They are color coded. The ones that are green are our 100% passers. The ones that are in red are our less than 75% passers, and the ones in yellow are kind of in between. And then I've got, our dirtiest sites pinpointed so that we can keep an eyeball on those. But just to kind of reinforce what I said, if you're a visual person like me, you can see that above Raleigh, right? Very clean, very nice. There's lots of greenery around those places, lots of places for nature to filter out that water. And then you hit Raleigh and suddenly, bleh. And that is just because there is a huge concentration of people and development and pets and animal operations to feed humans and pets. Right here. I mean, the Raleigh-Durham area is really exploding right now. I mean, there are creeks that have like 5 or more subdivisions being built next to them at once, which just puts a huge load on our waterways. And the same thing goes for Washington. Upriver is cleaner than downriver, and New Bern. Upriver is cleaner than downriver. So we really want to harp on those municipalities and those concentrations of people. That is where the bulk of the work needs to happen, and the information backs that up. But this is how we kind of plan out everything. A volunteer calls out, I'm sick today, my dog's got to go to the vet, I forgot I need to work, I forgot I have class, and then we kind of figure out who needs to go where, and we launch. So spend a lot of time there, and I'm a map person, so that does me better than this slide right here. But this is just a good list to have. So we know all our problems. We know the process around Swim Guide. What can you do? What can be done? First and foremost, the program is awesome. So if you can donate to the Swim Guide program, or if you can be a volunteer for sampling, or even, I mean, there's lots of room for volunteering. You can go collect samples. We need people to transport samples from point A to point B. Some of these sample locations are far from our office that they need to ultimately wind up at. So even if you're not the type of person to be crawling down the riverbank or leaning over a boat ramp. To just have somebody transport um, things from a sampler to our office is huge. And then you can donate. You can either donate generally, or you can sponsor a site. Or if you are, an employee within a city parks and rec, you can really sponsor a site on another level. So lots of ways to help out there. Do send me an email, clay@soundrivers.org, if you're interested in volunteering and everything. The other thing you can do is pick up pet waste wherever you see it. I mean, obviously, pick up after your own pet. Make sure that stuff is getting into a waste basket or getting into a container of some kind, that it's not just piling up in your yard, which is next to a ditch, that goes, yeah. It would take quite a human to go pick up everybody else's dog poop, but if you really want to help out one day, go to the dog park and pick up after everybody that wasn't good enough to pick up after themselves, because it's all going to the same place, whether it's yours or somebody else's. The other thing you can do is properly maintain and inspect your home septic system. If you got a home that was built way back when, and nobody's really been checking your septic system, make sure it's cleaned out, make sure all the pipes are connected and haven't cracked or anything like that, because you may think your septic system may not have a big impact, but if you're in a subdivision with 45 other houses that were all built 20, 30 years ago, it can really add up. And then keep a tab on your city, on your county. If you think a sewer line is leaking somewhere, call your county utility company, call North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. That is their job. A lot of people get nervous, like, I don't know who to call. Like, call your county and say, hey, something smells terrible here, something looks off, like, has this been inspected? Is this a problem? And even better, call us, because a lot of state agencies, a lot of counties are underfunded and understaffed, and we know that, but we also know to keep bugging them. We know who to call, we know who to email, and we're just going to bug them and bug them and bug them until they get around to it. So it can be easy for your average person's report to get lost in the sauce with DEQ, but when it's coming from us, we really hammer down on it. And take photos. Man, I can't stress that enough. It's really hard to piece together what's happening over the phone when you're like, it looks like foam on the water, and it looks like it's about this long, and I don't really know. So take a photo, take a video. And send that in to us or to your county utility or DEQ. You can kind of see over to the right, that picture of the sewer manhole right there, that is in Havelock. That is what happens when I say a sewer overflow in Havelock. That just starts happening. It happens for hours. It'll happen for a day. And that photo right below it is a big farm. I'm not entirely sure if it is a poultry operation or a hog farm, but it is one of those two. And right now it is flooded. And if those things are too close to the river, all the waste from those lagoons goes out into the river. I mean, we've even had dead animals come floating by. So if you see any of that, give us a call. And that is how you can help with our swim guide program. So I've done a ton of talking in a short amount of time. This last slide is to just really thank all of our volunteers. I was going to try and put them on this slide, but there's just like so many volunteers, and I don't even know the full extent of all our volunteers, because people are pulling in their kids, they're inviting their siblings out to help. There's students at high schools that pitch in, that are spearheaded by a teacher that I contact with. So to everybody that helped out this year, thank you so much. We really couldn't do it without you. And these are some of our monetary sponsors that have, helped pay for this program. It's like $9 a sample or something like that. So times 800 plus mileage and all that stuff and staff time. So we really appreciate all the funding and the time and the energy and everything from our volunteers and sponsors. And with that, let's get to questions because I know we got a few. I'm happy to answer any questions about whatever. Let's see what I already got in the chat up here. Yes, thank you, Lori. If you were to go to our map on our website right now, it has historic data because we are not currently updating that map with samples. So you'll get a little bit of an idea of what the samples looked like over the summer. And you can go to the swimguide.org and see a historical overview of the results from that location. And we have another question related to salinity. Oh, you had to ask the tough question. At what salinity level is Intero tested for? There's a little concern over some areas near New Bern that are tested for Intero. So, it's kind of crazy to say that it was very tough to find anyone to give me a number at which you consider water to be salty. So it's not like we called somebody and they were like, oh, if you get a salinity level of 7, that's when you should test for Intero. Instead, what we got from the professionals, I'm thinking Division of Marine Fisheries and DEQ and the EPA, is that Enterococci survives much better in saltwater. It also survives in freshwater very well, whereas E. coli really has very, very little tolerance for salinity. So while they could not say, 2 or 3 or 4 is your cutoff, they pretty much said that if there is any presence of salt in the water, go ahead and test with Intero. It's just a much more reliable indicator of fecal bacteria in those waters, and so that is just what we have adopted. So we're starting to really focus on the salinity levels at each site, and we're adding in buffers now that we know that they can change pretty drastically, and we're just going to make it a standard that if there's any presence of salinity in the water, we're going to go for that Intero sample, and we're not going to risk E. coli being a false positive. Yeah, so great question. Great question. Got another one over here. Historically speaking, has swim guide testing been implemented to fill a hole in state testing, or is the state continuing to test as well? Another great question. Yes, the state samples certain locations regularly. That is loose. In the summertime, let's say if there's a YMCA camp on the water, or I know like Goose Creek State Park, these are really well-known, popular recreation destinations. The state does go out there and sample monthly at least. Sometimes they'll do it weekly or 2 times a week. The thing is, and we operate around those areas. If we think they are sampling enough in one area, we're not going to double the efforts there. We may go nearby. But like Goose Creek is a good example. They test the swim beach there, so we're not going to go test the swim beach on top of them. But they really don't have as much of a public outreach as we do. They're not putting it on the radio. They're not putting it on social media. They have a database, and you got to kind of know where to go to look at the results. And also, if let's say they have a failure somewhere, they will go out and resample a couple times before they confirm that failure enough to notify the public of a safety concern. So we have a little bit of a different process in our sampling and our reporting procedures. But another key part of that question is to fill a hole in state testing, and that is a huge yes. The state, I think it was Jill, our Tar-Pamlico Riverkeeper, said it best. If the state was funded enough and they had enough people to do this, we would not need to exist as an organization. We are here because the agencies in charge of all this they just can't do it all. Um, they and that is a larger issue outside of swim guide. That has everything to do with shot callers in the political system, which is the river keepers avenue. You got to have folks that are going to lift water quality and transparency about water quality up as a priority and really be transparent to the public. And right now, I'll just say it's not at the level of transparency and tenacity that we would like it to be. So we're here to try and fill those gaps because we know that people hit the water a lot, and we know that water quality changes quickly and often. And so we really want to get that weekly information to people before they hit the water. And the state does too. They want to do it. There's just a lot of barriers that we don't have time to go into right now that creates those gaps that we're here to fill. So that is a fantastic question. Thanks, Courtney. We've got just a few more minutes. If anybody else has a question, throw it in the chat. I don't think I missed any. Let me just double check. This map that I just showed you here is my personal Google map. It changes all the time, so that map is not going to be linked anywhere, but it is pretty similar to the one on our swim guide page, because that's ultimately where the results go. So if there's a site on my map that you just looked at, it's going to be on our swim guide page. The colors are just going to be different. A lot of times I will color code my own map based on what sites are covered for the week and what aren't. That way I can help my interns and volunteers fill gaps. So let's see. Last question. We got time for one more. Educational outreach. What are your biggest topics that you try to educate the public, your average homeowner, about? Is it pet waste? Is it buffers? Is it runoff? Let me see. I would say, we really try and touch all those things because it is a cumulative effect to have both sediment and nutrient pollution in our waterways. Sediment and nutrient pollution are the biggest threats to our waterways as of right now. So that is development. Unchecked development is a huge topic that we try and educate on. Developers are out there trying to make a dollar. People are trying to find a place to live, and not a lot of thought goes into the impact on the creek behind the development. So we really try and push that into people's faces, like, hey, this creek looks like tomato soup. It's not supposed to look like tomato soup. That's not okay. If this keeps going, the creek is either going to be dead water with no life in it, or it's just going to fill in completely and it's going to be a sand pit. Pet waste. The more urban development that we have, the more suburban neighborhoods, the more people who have pets that are pooping everywhere. We at Sound Rivers, we love our pets. We also love personal responsibility. So yeah, educating the people, again, it's just people think about their one dog, their two dogs. How much of an impact could that possibly have? Well, it adds up. And then the buffers and the runoff, the Tar Pamlico and the Neuse River actually have some of the strictest rules around development and buffer zones from any rivers in the state. And that is 100% due to the actions of our organization, or should I say organizations, because Sound Rivers wasn't always Sound Rivers. We used to be the Neuse River Foundation. We used to be the Pamlico Tar River Foundation. Back in the 80s, we're some of the oldest grassroots organizations in the state. And the rivers were getting bad. To the point where they were about to be commercially dead. And the people just wasn't having it. So they came together and they lobbied and they pushed, and now they have some of the strictest development rules to ensure that we have a good buffer anywhere that we can have it to mitigate those runoff problems. So that is an excellent question. Also, it depends on where you are in the watershed. If you're up in Raleigh, we're really hammering on pet waste and urban development and sewer infrastructure. If you're in rural East NC, we're pushing hog farm buffers and aging infrastructure in small towns, so it depends. And thank you for that question. That's a great last question. I'm getting a reminder that we need to wrap it up, and I got some plugs to do. If you enjoyed this program, this is our Tell Me About It Tuesday program. We do it every month. Our next Tell Me About It Tuesday is going to be November 8th. Let me pull up my thing. Yeah, November 8th. Stop sharing my screen. That's going to be a good one. Our Tarpamlico River Keeper and our Noose River Keeper, Sam and Jill, they're going to do a recap of that 150-mile paddle that I was talking about, and the 10 days that it took to do it. And they took their dogs, and they dodged the hurricane, and they camped the whole way down. So that's going to be a really good one to tune in for. It's really cool. You can also check out our Facebook page to kind of get a recap of that adventure right now, but tune in for that. Also, we got an oyster roast coming up. We have not been able to do it for the last couple of years because of COVID and all that stuff, but we are back, and we have tickets available, but it looks like we're going to be sold out this year. So early bird special. The oyster roast is November 12th. It is November 12th, and tomorrow is the last day of our early bird special. So you can get, if you're a non-member, it's going to be $65 for a ticket. If you're a member, it's $60 a ticket, and that's going to go up just a little bit after tomorrow. So go ahead, get your oyster roast tickets. It's an awesome event. It's right here in Washington, by the waterfront. Oysters, adult beverages, music, a silent auction. It's a great time. So with that, we are at 8:00. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time. Feel free to email clay@soundrivers.org or info@soundrivers.org with any questions or concerns that you may have. And hopefully we'll see you next year for Swim Guide 2023. All right. Thank you all for your comments, and I'll see you later.